All right, so on your computer, you're going to go to the Start menu, you're going to go to Computer, and you'll find in your computer the P drive. And you're going to make a new folder on the P drive, so you can click the New Folder button, and you'll make a new folder, and you'll call it whatever your last name is, underscore F2015. Okay, if you already have one, you can already use the one from a previous class if you've already set that up. 2015 for 2015. Okay, inside that folder, you're going to make a 2540 folder. Okay, and then inside that folder, you're going to make a work and a source folder. Everything that you turn in or everything that you work on, it goes in the work folder. Everything that you get as reference or lectures or source images or whatever that you're just kind of keeping on your desktop or keeping in your folders will go into source. Okay, so in case something happened and you needed to only back up one folder, you could back up the work folder and be safe knowing that you have all the work that you need. Okay, so that's that. Now we can boot up Maya. So go to the Start menu, type in Maya or type in 2016, and open up Maya. Okay, you may get a pop-up that says you want to highlight the recent things or new stuff, whatever you want to do. All right, so we're going to go and set up some preferences first. So we're going to go down by the little running man in the bottom right corner and click on him. These are our animation preferences. For animation, we're going to use different preferences than we would in the modeling class or the intro class or the dynamics class because of some of the stuff that we want to do. One of the things that we want to be able to do is have just a little bit more frames per second. Okay? When we looked at that popcorn kernel, we looked at that face slap, there's 5,400 frames per second. What that gives us is a lot more detail happening in that 1 second. Okay? So for this, we want to set this up so that we have 30 frames a second so that we just get an extra 6 frames to pump into our animation. So under the settings on the left, just change your timestamp to NTSC 30 frames per second. Okay. Then under your time slider, we're going to make sure that it says playback speed is play every frame, but the max playback speed is real time 30 frames per second. Wanted to set your undos to 200, I would say that's the highest you should go. No less than 50, no more than 200. It's a good range to be in. Okay. Yes, sir. All right, so now that we have that, you'll notice in our timeline that it says 1.25 is my starting time. That's not correct. We want that to be set to 1, so just type in a 1 there. Okay, and then rewind your time slider so it goes back to frame 1. I have to move this over just so you guys can see this because it's cut off. There we go. So now we can see everything. Okay. So now we're at frame 1. These two are reading as frame 1. This is 150 and 250. All right. So inside here, we have our timeline. That's what this thing is. So these are all the frames, not seconds. Those are all the frames of our animation. So we have basically 150 frames right here. So how many seconds is this? What was that? 30 frames a second. 5 seconds, yes. Okay, so we have 5 seconds of animation in here. So think about how many frames we have to play with for each thing. Now, that's going to be, it seems like a lot, but it's really not, okay? We also have down here, there's a 1, and then a 150 and a 250. The outer ones, this one here and this 250 right there, those are basically our entire work area that we're playing with, okay? So you have 1 to 250. This here, inner one, and this 150 is just that area that we're kind of zoomed in on, okay? So right now we're only looking at 1 to 150, but we actually have 250 frames, all right? Either one of these can be changed. We can change them both, whatever, okay? Don't worry about what they are now. You can always add them later or take them away at the end or ignore them or whatever. All right, so that's mainly our area. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a sphere. So create a, I don't care, polygon, NURB sphere, whatever. So we have a sphere. Anytime we animate, it doesn't matter in the big global scheme of things, but it does matter to me because I'm kind of OCD about it. I don't like to animate a sphere halfway through the grid. It's kind of weird, okay? So I'm going to go to my translate Y and set my translate Y to 1 so that my sphere then sits on the grid, because that makes me happier that my sphere is actually on the grid, okay? Now, again, I don't like that there's a 1 in there and my sphere is on the grid, so I want to eliminate that. So I'm going to go under Modify, and I'm going to freeze my transformations. Okay, I'm going to go to the option box, make sure Translate, Rotate, and Scale are clicked, and then freeze it, and then I will have everything reset back to 0. He's sitting on the grid. It's glorious. Oh, yes. Now make sure too, as we start animating stuff, in the bottom left corner of your screen, you see this little X, Y, and Z here. Everything is facing the correct direction, okay? Meaning, we're not like that. See how my Y is upside down? If I were to put this over here, everything in this area-ish looks right, but I'm upside down. So what happens is when I start animating, I'm going this way. He's actually going down, right? So we don't want that. Some people will animate like that, and again, that's a no-no. All right, so now he's here. We're cool. So now what we want to do is we want to animate this guy moving from this side of the screen to that side of the screen. All right, so we're going to pull him back to a -12 in X. And again, it's always nice to have round numbers. You have -12, -5, whatever, it makes it a lot easier. Okay, so it's nice to have these round numbers. So if we can punch them in, great, but it's not always necessary to do something like that. So -12 is where we're going to start. Now, anytime we set keyframes, remember I talked about Pixar and how many keyframes they have? Okay, what we don't want to do is set unnecessary keyframes. So right now we're just going to animate this sphere going from here straight across to there. So which attribute should I set keyframes on?
Translate X.
Translate X.
Yeah. Keyframe from -12, move over, set your keyframe.
Right. Okay. Right, and then we can tweak it after that. So we're going to set keyframes just on the X over here. So we're going to right-click right on the word. Whoa. And go to Key Selected. Okay? Now a couple things to pay attention to. What color did that Translate X turn?
Red.
Red. Okay? In older versions of Maya, it may turn pink. I don't know why they changed the color, but it was a pinkish color. Yeah. Make sure I'm paying attention. So that means keyframe. As we do other stuff, different things mean different colors, or different colors mean different things. All right, so we're at frame 1. We want this at -12. We've set a key for those things. Then we're going to go up to frame 60, move this to +12, and then set another key. Okay? Now we're doing key selected because, again, we don't want to set keyframes for everything. If we set keyframes for everything, it just makes a big mess. And that's why they did the other color. If we look, watch my 12 here after I go off of 60. See how it now turns to that pink color? So now I know that when I'm on a key, it's red. When I'm off of a key, it's that pink color. That was not there before. That's a cool feature. Okay? So now if we just hit play, we'll see the ball just scooting across the screen. Okay? Now we do have a lot of wasted keyframe, or a lot of wasted frames, right? Because we're only focused on 1 to 60. We're not focused on the rest of this animation. Okay? So what should we do? What do we change so that we're only focused on 1 to 60?
You change the slider at the bottom right there.
Right. We change that to 60, so we just come here and type in 60. Right? Okay? So now we're only focused on that, so we can really zoom in on just that action, make sure that action is good, and start tweaking it. Now, like you said, we wanted to add some easing into this, but if we watch it, it looks like there already is some easing. Okay? Look at the beginning, how it slowly starts moving, and at the end, how it starts to slow down. Okay? And in the middle, it actually looks like it's picking up a little bit of speed. So we do have, by default already, a little bit of easing in there. Every version of Maya, it seems, they change what the defaults are. So it's always best to just ignore what they have, just get in there and start playing with it. Now we're going to start adding tools. We're going to start using different tools over and over and over again. When we do that, we want to start creating shelves so that we can start to introduce quicker workflows into our setup. So on this little sprocket on the shelf area, we're going to click it and make a new shelf. And I would call it your last name _ 2540. When we start getting into doing our own preferences, you miss it? The little gear right here, and then go to new shelf. When you start getting into making your own preferences, a good way to see did my preferences load correctly is my shelf now listed up there? If it is, success. All right, so Sarcona 2540, we hit OK. And now we have a blank shelf. So now let's start adding stuff in there. Okay. So two things I always like to have is going to be the delete history and the center pivot. So the way we add it, now watch me just so you don't screw it up, is we hold Control-Shift, we go to Edit, we go to Delete by Type, and we go to History. Now I clicked it once, it created it. We didn't see anything happen because nothing happens that is like apparent until we click away and then we can see that button. Okay, so just go to Control-Shift, Edit, Delete by Type, History, and then go to Modify Center Pivot. And then we're going to keep it held down. And we'll also go to Modify Freeze Transformations. But this one I'm going to hit the option box. Okay? And what that means is that Freeze Transformations, anytime I click this button, it'll open the option box and I can set some stuff. Because I always want to look at the options. Under Window, I want to keep Control-Shift held and go to the Outliner. That's good there. Under Animation Editor, I'm going to go to Graph Editor and Dope Sheet. Okay, so delete history, center pivot, freeze transform option box, outliner, graph editor, dope sheet. Okay, at any point we can add more, at any point we can take some away. As you're working, you may find you're always going to this button or that button or whatever, add it. Okay, our first day, we're going through how to do this so that as you start working, you can customize this entire mess. Everyone's good so far? No, not yet. Okay, so now let's grab the sphere and we'll go to the graph editor. Okay, so we click the sphere, we click GE to get to the graph editor, and then we can see our points. Working on my own computer when I have two monitors, typically the main monitor is where we're seeing stuff happen, and then over on the other monitor is where I have my graph editors and dope sheets and all this other stuff happening, just so you know how I work. So here's the graph right there. It's kind of small. We can zoom in just like we do inside Maya. Okay? Easiest way to do it is just hit F. It'll frame it. We can see exactly what's happening. Okay? Now we have to be aware too that this is a visual representation of this graph. And what that means is if I do this, there we go. So if I do that, how much movement is happening on that sphere?
The same amount.
The same amount, right? It changed nothing. But the graph doesn't look like that. Because I've scaled essentially my view of the graph, it looks like nothing is happening. Okay? So just be aware of that. Sometimes we'll have things that go to extreme amounts and things that move slightly, and we have to make sure we're looking at the correct ones. Okay? So a couple things. On the left here is our object, P-sphere 1. Underneath it, we have translate X. Okay? So we can grab that and hit F and it frames it. We can grab this item here and hit F and it frames it. I think we can even pin it. Yeah, there we go. We can pin it so it's always there, I guess. But we don't need to do that. Okay? So looking at this graph, you can see what it looks like. It is easing in at the beginning. That's what this indicates here. It is speeding up right there, and it is easing out at the end. So we see the ease out, the linear stuff, the faster stuff, and then the easing in at the end. Okay? So it definitely is doing that kind of thing. Now up here at the top, see where this has the little A? It's hard to see, but it says auto tangents. Okay? So if we click our curve, okay, and I just marquee it, you don't have to actually click on it, just marquee the center, and we hit this A, nothing is going to happen. Okay? It's basically already set to the same tangents that would be there for an auto. If I go to the next one, you'll see what happens here is it changes. It makes it now linear. Okay? And in linear, there is no acceleration or deceleration. It just goes one speed. So I'm going to just scoot this up like that. And I'm going to hit play. And if we now look at this animation, you can definitely see it looks a bit different, right? So we clicked on this guy here, we hit play, and now we essentially have a different kind of animation. It's going perfectly straight, constant speed all the way across. It's kind of like it's in a loop. Okay? So that's one way that we can change our speed of this thing. Now if I go to the next one, you'll see it's pretty much the same thing. If I go to the next one, it's the same thing. Go to this one, it's flat. And now we're back to that easing in and easing out. All of those settings that I'm clicking on, what they do is they figure out how keyframes are going from one point to another point to another point, and based on whichever button we've clicked, they'll do different things. So when we only have two keyframes, not a big change. We basically have ease in, ease out, or we have linear. Okay, those are the two big ones. If I start adding more keyframes and doing more stuff to this, it'll definitely change how these keyframes are interacting. Okay, don't do this to yours. I'm going to do it to mine so you can see it. So I'm going to go here and pull this really far up and then set another key. And then I'm going to go here, pull this back. Okay, so now I have this different setup. And now I should be getting different things when I go to some of these. So look at that one. Here's auto that looks pretty much the same. This one is spline tangents, and you'll see that it looks a bit different. You can see that the handlebars, someone stole my pointer, and I can't point to things. Now I have a ruler. So if you look at these handlebars, you can see that this first one looks like it's pretty much like the linear one, where it's going on the upward climb. This one is slightly off, okay? It's not perfectly flat like it was before. It's slightly off. This one's slightly off, and this one is at an angle. Spline tries to keep the motion nice and fluid, okay? That's what it's doing. It's trying to keep a nice, smooth graph going along. If I hit play on this, it's going to look funky, obviously. Okay? But it tries to keep a nice fluid motion happening to it. If we go to the next one, you'll see that there's not much of a change here. If we go to linear, you'll see that we have constant motion. Doot, doot, doot. Okay? If we go to this one, we're basically at flat. So it eases out, eases in and out, eases in and out, eases in. Okay? So it's easing all of these with a flat tangent. Okay? And this animation may look very similar to the spline one, except for the endpoints. This last one that's in here, well, this one's plateau, which looks very similar to the other one. This other one's stepped. Look at that. It's pretty straight, and then they have a keyframe. Pretty straight, and then the keyframe. Okay?
Oh, wow.
So this is more of like on and off type of animation. So let's say we had an emitter, a particle emitter. It's shooting out 10,000 particles a second, and then it just cuts off. Okay? Instead of us going to frame 50 and telling it to be 10,000, and then going to frame 51 and saying be 0, I can say be 10,000 and then be 0. And it'll automatically just cut it off when it gets to that 0 point. Or a light.
I don't know how to animate dash the grades. It seems instantly once probably 12 minutes.
No, they would just move them. But this is something that, you know, when we do certain things, we would definitely use this kind of animation stuff. All right. Now, another one, let me show you what the difference is here with this clamped one. So I'm going to go here. And these two, I'm just going to set to be the same value, 5. Okay. So here's spline. So you see how spline, if I zoom in on this, is trying to keep a nice smooth motion here. If I go to plateau, it flattens that area out. Okay, because they're essentially the same value, why would it move past it and then come back to it? Where spline is moving past it and coming back to it. Okay, so then I plateau it. All right, so see how we have a little hold right here. Hold and then go. Hold and then go. Here's spline. There is no hold. It just kind of like circumvents it and comes back to it. Okay, so the biggest thing with these is just be aware that those are there. Sometimes you use them. Most of the time you're probably not going to use them. Okay, yes sir.
How do you go about manually changing
The
in the graph editor itself as opposed to using the preset?
That's our next step. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to tweak these things. Because like I said, by default, you're typically not always going to get good animations out of them because they're defaults. You're just kind of like lazy man's way to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to manually do this. Now this is going to be a tricky part, just like everything else, because it involves you kind of learning how to select stuff in the graph editor. So everything I do, if you watch it, I'm never clicking. I don't click on the graph. I don't click on the handlebars. I'm marqueing. Okay? Click, drag. So if I wanted to grab this handlebar, I'll cut that. If I want to grab that handlebar there, I click and drag to highlight the graph. Then I click and drag to highlight the handlebar. Okay? I'm in the move tool, so now all I have to do is just middle mouse button, click and drag, and I can move the handlebar how I want it. Okay? So marquee, marquee, click and drag. So do that and just play for a second with those things and try to get a different graph.
How do you break the tangent?
This graph, if we look at it, what do you think it's doing? Let's stop the animation. So what do you think the animation is doing right at the beginning?
Taking off,
Taking off. Going really quick, right? And then what's happening at the end?
leveling off.
Right, it's leveling off, it's slowing down. All right? This is going to be a hard area for some of you to kind of wrap your head around of what the graph editor is doing compared to what we're seeing in our view.
How do we read the graph editor as far as lateral numbers to horizontal numbers?
The numbers going across the bottom are our frames.
Okay.
Okay? So right now we have a keyframe at frame 1, right? So here's frame 1, there's our keyframe. We have another keyframe at frame 60. Here's frame 60. We go straight up, and there's our keyframe. The other direction, the vertical direction, is your value, okay? So in this case, at frame 1, we have a negative 12, right? That's what we set our first keyframe to as negative 12.
Right.
And then at frame 60, we set it to positive 12. So that's over there. If we select one of the keyframes, whoops, that's the other thing that's kind of silly about this. There's actually like a range around this where if you select it, you just click and drag, it actually moves the items. So just be careful with that. If we marquee that, here is the frame that it's on. Here's the value of that keyframe. Okay? So at frame 1, we're at negative 12. Okay? And we can change that up there too. We can make it negative 14 or positive 12 or whatever we want. Okay? Yep. The time. The value. Okay? So for translate x, it's negative 12 here and then positive 12 there. Now you'll also see that this is red. This red means something. What does it mean?
Yeah, there's an actual keyframe.
No. That's what this keyframe means. That's what that red means there. What does this red in the graph mean?
Oh, the graph.
Yes. Let's try this. I'm going to go to Z and set a key. Okay, now look at this one. It's blue.
Oh, okay. So red is the X, and
Mm-hmm.
blue would be the Z. So each one of them plays the way you want, up, down, left, to right.
Right. So red is always going to be X.
Right.
Green is always going to be Y, and blue is always going to be Z. Okay? And that makes this, that's the same thing for rotation, the same thing for scale. So keep those things in mind as you're working. Yes, sir.
Now, if you were to have multiple, like if you were to have rotate as well as a scale, though.
You would just see two different X's.
Oh, okay.
But typically you would be, let's say we're rotating something. The rotate one is going to be a bigger scale typically because the rotate values usually go up higher, right? So that's just, it breaks it down, but then we still have to break it down once we're in there.
Okay, so they're still going to be the same colors, it's just you have a different name.
Exactly. Over here on the left, where it says translate X, we would see scale X and rotate X and all the other ones.
Okay.
Okay? And now this is one of the reasons we don't want to set keyframes for everything. So just keep yours where it is. I'm going to go back to the beginning and just set keyframes for everything. Okay? So now look at all the stuff that I have inside here that we don't need. This is all stuff that Maya's writing out and it's using. It's just information that it just doesn't need. It's like a waste, right? But you can see there's the values. So I'm just going to delete all these ones that we don't need. Now stuff like visibility, it doesn't have an X, Y, and Z. It just gets a gray color, okay? Random values that don't have an X, Y, or Z just get gray. So just so you're aware of that. All right, so now we are able to move these handlebars up and down, left and right. But what if we wanted to go extreme, right? We want to kick it up a notch. So I can't take these handlebars and I can't middle drag and really pull the handlebar like we're in Photoshop or Illustrator or After Effects. I can't pull that handlebar. It's a two-step process to get us to be able to pull the handlebar. Number one, we go to tangents and we say free tangent weight. Nope, we don't. Oh, there we go. We go to curves, that's what it is, and we go to weighted tangents. Okay? That makes these a bit bigger and round, still pretty much the same thing that we had before. And the other step is to go to tangent and say free tangent weight. Now this is hollow. Now I can pull this as far as I want. Okay, now we have to do that per handlebar. Okay, and again, you can look at these different animations just by setting a couple keyframes and seeing different ways that we can animate the same two keyframes, different results that we can get from that. I went to curves, weighted tangent. Yes. And then free tangent weight. Yep. This is so that we can take the handlebar and pull it out further. Okay? And what that gives us is more control over that curve. Because we'll find that there's sometimes when we really want to kind of exaggerate that motion. Look at the animation of my ball. it goes pretty slow and then it speeds up real quick and then slows down again. We can't get that without doing that kind of thing or setting a bunch of keyframes. This? Yeah. Well, I think his nose broke off. When you go to curves, weighted tangents, that does it to the whole curve. So once you've done it once to that curve, you don't have to do that again. Okay? So like for this one, I did it once for the whole curve, but then for each one of these tangents, I had to go to tangent and say free the tangent weight. Okay? Now there's a lot of bells and whistles and a lot of tweaking things inside of here that, you know, some people may use, but typically everyone doesn't use those on a daily basis. So we're not covering them. They may be good at some point for you to go through once you kind of understand more of the tools and just see what some of these things would do. Okay? Some of them are used for specific things like curves. There you go, simplify curve. So when you get something like from motion capture data, motion capture is every single frame for every single object, there's keyframes. So if you wanted to tweak any of that stuff, it's very difficult to do because there's so many keyframes. So you may want to simplify it in order to get something that, you know, you can actually work with. Now I'll show you another example of that. Let me just stop this. Okay. So I just took my little ball here and I'm going to do an expression on this. Oops. I didn't want that to be that much. There we go. Okay. So here I have this ball and it's basically just moving a random number between 0 and 30 every single frame. Okay? Not what I want because it just creates some crazy movement. But what I can do is I can bake this simulation. Modify. Nope. Edit. Keys. There it is. Bake simulation. And I'm going to say just from the channel box, every frame, bake it. Good. Go to the graph editor. All right. So here are the keyframes from that bake. So basically it took the expression I wrote. It went to frame 1. Keyframed it, went to frame 2, keyframed it, went to frame 3, keyframed it. So I get this really random motion inside here. Then I could go into my curve and say simplify it. And sure. And now I've simplified the curve. So now it's much easier to read, much easier to work with. And then I could go through and maybe delete some of these. Or maybe grab these ones and just set them all to be at 20. Okay, so now I get this kind of smoother motion happening. Now that might seem like a silly thing, like when would you ever want this to happen? But think about just like some random movement happening, right? If you had right, exactly. Bugs it's a great example because that's exactly what we would use it for, just something with random motion to it. Even like, you know, something rocking back and forth. We don't want to go through and set some keyframes this way and some keyframes that way for this entire animation. So why not do an expression and then simplify it and then tweak those parameters, right? Okay, so it's very cool to be able to do stuff like that. It's just a matter of you playing with those settings and trying stuff out. Silly. Then we can just delete that and then our animation is gone. Delete that. Okay. All right, so now we have this item here, and we were at this point. Good. Okay. So we can continue playing with that. Now, the other thing that we can do, I'm going to close the graph editor, so close your graph editor. And then we're going to open up the dope sheet. So that's the one that's DS on your shelf. Okay, the dope sheet is another area that we really like to play in because the dope sheet basically it lays out all of our keyframes for us in a spreadsheet format, okay? So on the bottom, it may be hard to see it, on the bottom we have frames. So here is frame 0, right there, or frame 1, there's a keyframe. At frame 60, there's my other keyframe, okay? So this allows me to grab this block right here, and with my middle mouse button, I can move that keyframe wherever I want. Now what happens if I move my keyframe closer to my other keyframe?
They're gonna get faster.
It goes faster. What happens if I move it further away?
They're gonna get slower.
It gets slower, okay? So this is where it's great to be able to do this because we can take these keyframes and adjust their time. Remember one of the 12 principles was timing, getting this stuff to line up correctly? Now we're looking at, in this case, we're looking at one keyframe on the start and one keyframe at the end. The cool thing about the dope sheet is that if we had 50 keyframes, we could grab them all very quickly and move them over, okay? So we can just quickly just kind of adjust this and see where everything is at. And it's a much simpler layout than the graph editor because we're just looking at these little ticks. Now you'll see inside here, there's a tick at the top of this, and there's a tick at the bottom of this, okay? I recommend that you grab the ticks individually. You can't, like if I marquee both of these, it doesn't do anything, right? Because the top one, these top ones here are basically everything in the list, and the individual ones are the individual ones, okay? So if I had, and I'm going to just do this so we can see it, duplicate special, input graph, and okay. All right. So now I have all of these. You can see how I have 5 different spheres, and they each have their own little ticks in there. So I could grab this one and move it over. Not sure why it's not updating. It should be updating.
Let's say graph.
All right, I'll move that one. Okay, so you can see how I can just grab these in a fashion like this and just tweak what they look like. And now as I hit play, you can see how they gradually come to the same spot, but they do it, their time being offset just slightly, okay? Or I can marquee up here and grab them all and tweak all of these. Oops. Why didn't I grab that one? There it goes. Okay, so it's a very easy way to kind of manipulate and adjust lots of things at one time. When we do our first animation, the stick animation, this is going to play a huge role to make this stick look the correct way. Okay, so we can close that for now. We're done with it. And then let's make a project and we'll save it. So we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Project Window, and we're going to make a new project. And we'll call it your last name underscore playing. All right, and then we'll put that inside your work folder for the 2540. So go to Computer, go to P drive, go to your folder, go to Work, and hit Select.
Oh, is that all?
What was that?
No.
That's all, yeah. And then once you're done there, you hit Accept, and just save your scene as just playing around. Doesn't matter, we're just playing around. Okay? And then once you're done with that, we'll close Maya.
Can you tell us to also set the project or not?
We don't need to set it. Once we've created it, it's already set.
Oh, that's
Okay?
thank you.
So now that we have closed Maya, what happens is all of our preferences, our shelves, everything that we've customized gets written out to the preferences. So then what we can do is back up the preferences and we're good to go. So then we're going to go to the computer again, go to the P drive, and on the P drive is just a 2016 folder. So like in mine, you have a 2016 folder, okay? What's that? You can. Yeah. You're going to cut that, so you hit Control X, and then in your folder, you'll just paste that 2016 folder right there. Okay? So we've gone into the P drive, cut the 2016 folder, gone into your specific folder, and pasted that 2016 folder. Okay? So what we've done is just backed up our preferences. So now what we would do is we would go back And this folder here, my Sarcona F 2015, that's what we want to back up. So if you have a thumb drive, that goes on your thumb drive. If you don't have one, upload it to Dropbox or email it to yourself or whatever, just so you have all the stuff that you're going to need. Mine's already, because I have other stuff in there. I'm like, it's already 2 gigs. It's just today. That's other stuff. Okay? So that